Thank you, Joe. Thanks always, Joe and Shelley, for being the sponsors of this event. It's been great fun for me to be the host um, and find speakers like Blake, who I think Shelley you introduced me to, and just a few minutes of talking to Blake, I knew that he'd be such a great speaker because of some of his ideas about juxtaposing different kinds of things. So he came up with this word Quagileology, which is the study of quality mindset in agile teams to give insights on how teams can inform before they begin delivering so that they're set up for success. So he's got some ideas about that. Um, so Blake is the Senior Director of Quality Assurance and Agile Delivery for Accent Care. He's got over 25 years of experience in leading QA teams. He's implemented Agile in several different organizations across healthcare, credit, and hospitality verticals. And he's a certified Scrum Master. He's been that way for 11 years and has a natural passion for quality, agile, and leadership and empowering teams. So without further ado, Blake, if you want to add anything that I missed that's important for others to know about you, fire away.
Well, thanks for having me, everybody. So it's nice to be here. And John, thank you so much. I think you pretty much covered it on the intro there. I mean, you really did nail, I guess if you were to ask me an elevator pitch, everybody has an elevator pitch. What are the three things? And the three things are just exactly what you said. I mean, if you asked me what I was about, I would say I'm about quality assurance. I'm about leadership, and I'm about psychology of teams, especially. And how do it seems like every time I've ever been asked to speak or give my insights on things, for me, it always comes back to those three things. And I find those kind of three things inseparable. It's kind of like my little golden triangle of how I interpret, IT and QA. And so I think with those three things, it's probably nothing that nobody hasn't heard before, but maybe they just haven't heard it in the way that I think about it. I don't know. I will let people decide if they get anything out of it. But I do think that sometimes, especially in IT, we make things kind of hard. And I think sometimes they're really not as hard as we make them out to be. So maybe that's the viewpoint that I have on those three things. So
Yeah, it could be that you've coined a term that everybody knows and does. There's no word for it. And so it could be something like that. And you've got some intriguing ideas that you and I have talked briefly about. And the first one I want to dive right into because it's the one I'm most curious about. We didn't really talk about it when we met a bit, but you talk about quality as a row and not a column.
right.
So tell me about that. Like put it in a model in a space where you can talk more about what that
Right.
means.
I have a boss that everything he does is on a spreadsheet. Everything. Like literally, if he could write a report, if he were in college, he would write it in Excel and not in Word. And so we joke about this all the time. So whenever I want to relay things to him, I talk in Excel talk. And so this is kind of where this thought came from is like, when we talk about quality assurance and you talk about a team, and I think we talked about this, is that, oftentimes quality assurance is actually mislabeled or actually really quality control when you're talking about a testing organization. Quality assurance is oftentimes a group that sits outside of IT, and they're in control of all the quality processes that happen throughout an organization. So oftentimes quality assurance teams are really kind of mislabeled. And so the idea of quality assurance is that, everybody obviously has their stake in quality assurance. I mean, quality isn't just it's not a stop along the development life cycle, right? If we're just having quality here, I'm sure you guys have heard the saying that you can't test quality into an application. You know what I mean? So there has to be quality somewhere at the beginning. There has to be quality delivering at the end. And what are the things that we can do? And what are some of the metrics that we can put in place that would actually show us that we're delivering quality and that we're getting, the quality that we need to get. So I think that's where the metrics matter that we talked about. That's in the advertisement for this. The way that we know that we're delivering quality is we have metrics that we actually pay attention to, that we actually openly discuss with one another. And you can hear a leaf blower, I think, in the background now. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
really.
You can't hear that because
It's
I
very
can hear
faint.
it. So,
Yeah, yeah.
sorry about that.
Well, as long as you can hear me, I guess that's the most important.
Yeah, we're good. I can
Yeah,
hear
it's not distracting.
you.
All right. Another thing you mentioned is that quality is often defined as the absence of defects or adherence to requirements. Does that go deeper
Yeah,
than?
that's a pretty much standard definition, I think, when you talk about quality, is that what quality is? And I think the other thing that I would add to that is going back to a metric is, is your customer happy? I mean, that's a quality metric right there, right? You can deliver what you said you would deliver. You could deliver it even with quality, but at the end of the day, is your customer, whether it's internal or external, I have a lot of internal customers with the testing that we do. So the question is are they happy? And so part of what we do is as part of our quality delivery is we ask our customer to tell us how we did on a month to month. We run on basically monthly sprints and 20 business days. And we asked them to grade us. And not only do we ask them to grade us, we surface our grades out to everybody so that everybody can see it. We don't try to hide it at all. So if we had a great release, everybody sees it. If we mess up, everybody sees it. So that helps keep the team accountable, and the team wants to do a good job. And we found that when we do that, we've actually brought the product team closer to us. The whole idea of a scrum as a huddle, right? We want to bring people together, and oftentimes product is throwing things over a wall. There's like a wall between the groups. We try really hard to bring them in, and by reaching out to them and telling them, asking, how did we do? Because when I came into this position that I have, there was no relationship really, other than product thought we did a terrible job. And so how did we attack that? So there were some things that we put in place to try to really get them closer to us. But I think I think customer satisfaction and did you deliver? I think that's another idea of are we delivering with quality and not just adherence, absence of defects, adherence to requirements? Yes, absolutely. But are you happy with what we delivered? Did we deliver exactly what you wanted? That's
Can
huge.
you talk about the metrics a bit, or are
Yeah.
they like, yeah, so how is it 5 stars or some kind of Likert
Yeah, so
scale, or?
we use the it's called NPS, so Net Promoter Score, which probably many of you have heard of. It's usually something that's used kind of more in marketing. So I was just looking for something easy to use. I had never done this before until I got to this job, and I was like, what could I do that could be easy, that people would likely respond to, that would give us something meaningful? It doesn't have to be super detailed, but it would at least give us a litmus test of where we're at. So we sent out our first NPS score. The scores go from -100 to 100, and you only get positives. You only get a positive number if they give you a 9 or a 10. If anyone gives you a 7 or an 8, that means they're neutral. They're Switzerland. They don't really have an opinion of you one way or the other. And anything 6 or below takes your score south. So we did our first NPS score, and we started with I believe it was a -37 or a -44. It doesn't really matter, because once you're that far left, then you have nowhere really to go. But it's like when it's 110 in Phoenix, doesn't matter if it's 115. It was bad. So but they did us a favor, right? They did us a favor. They gave us a score. The team was a little bit worried about that. And I just told the team, we have 2 ways to look at this. We can be sad about it, or we can say, hey, we're going to make some history here, and we're going to be the team that took that number from here and moved it all the way to here. They did you a favor. You're going to kill that score. And so that's one thing that we did. And that was huge. That was really a huge metric. And we can come back to that if you want. But some of the other metrics we have are some of the normal ones that QA would have. Escape defects, obviously, is very important. We have like test case effectiveness. How effective are our test cases? Are our test cases actually finding defects? If they're not, why? And if not, let's get rid of them. Let's make sure that we have the right test cases in place, right? And then test accuracy. Like when we write up our defects, how many of our defects were either fixed or confirmed and deferred? Anything else is not a real defect and counts against us. So we're trying to write like defects that actually matter, that actually, they're not just closed as user error or, whatever, data issue, what have you. Mean time to defect is another one we have. So, how fast are we finding these defects? Are we getting faster at finding defects as we go into sprints? Dev has their unit test coverage. So we're talking about quality as a road. Dev has their unit test coverage that they have to have in place. They've got to have their peer reviews. And then the BA teams are on my team as well. So we have metrics for them for backlog readiness. What percentage is our backlog ready? And we actually track escape requirements. So this is huge because we track for them, just like we can have escape defect out of QA, we can have an escape requirement, and we differentiate, or we can call it a scope creep if we want, either one. We can call it scope creep, escape requirements. We track that and we review that, and we can attribute, sometimes they come from the business, sometimes they can come from IT. So I don't ding the team when it comes from the business coming in at the last second going, oh yeah, we need this. But if it's something that we should have known, that we count that. And then the last thing that we have is ideal velocity. So ideal velocity is this concept that I came up with, which is just really, I know how many people we have on the team. I know how many hours we have in a sprint. Therefore, I can come up mathematically with how much time each user story is taking us to actually complete. So that can extrapolate how much time defects take us to fix and how big they are. And this comes over like 3 months worth of data. I was able to come up with my own formula to figure this out. But the bottom line here is that we come up with this metric of ideal velocity, which says, here's what we delivered. Here's what we could have delivered had we not had all these defects in the system. And so it's mainly to show the team, not that we had defects. That's okay. We're not worried about
Yeah.
that. We're
Right.
worried about, we don't want these lines to get really far apart. And when we first
Yeah.
started, they were really far apart. And now those lines are really, really close together over time. It didn't happen overnight, but now those lines, and one time in one sprint, in the 3.5 years I've been here, those lines actually met, where we had a sprint where no defects were found, no defects were actually even written, no escape defects were reported. That's perfect world. That doesn't ever happen. That happened once,
Yeah.
but that's the concept. And those are the metrics that we use to run our team. And we review those metrics at the end of every sprint outside of the retrospective. We talk for 15 minutes and we have a chart, we have a graph, we walk through it. We congratulate the team. We send that out to everybody so everybody can see it, because we want to be accountable.
So when you talk about customers, I went to Accent Care, and
Right.
it's home health care, palliative care. So
Right.
I assume the software is an app or some kind of interface for home healthcare providers that
Yeah,
help
so
them
it's
do.
basically applications that are used internally. So I saw a question pop up when we were talking about
Yeah,
what
yeah,
were
for the
internal. And
customers. Yeah.
yes, my customers in this instance are internal. It's product organizations all the way down to clinicians in the home, nurses. Like you said, we do home healthcare and hospice. We have a bunch of different things that we can test, all the way from reports that are generated, but that are consumed by different organizations throughout the company that we develop and that we test. We have a referral management application. We have doctor's notes applications. So we have and there's other ones, but we have a pretty wide variety. But all the consumers of those applications are internal to us. So we're constantly reaching out and asking, and that changes. That the people, as people leave, or if people move into other positions, then we go and get other people and bring them in and include them in the grading of how we're doing on the NPS scores. And so I will come back to that and just say the team, because the team deserves accolades on this, is that they started at -37, and they now have had, last month was the 25th consecutive month of having a world-class score over 70. So it started at -44, -37. It went up a little bit to it got to 0. We hit 20 along the way. We got to 4. We got to 10. We got to 20. We got to 40. Then we immediately dropped straight back down to 20 or 15. And then we shot up. And then the team has been cruising now, where they've had 25 consecutive. Anything over 70 is considered world class. And they've done that because the team became self-managed over time. And they run themselves, and they do a
Tell,
tremendous job.
tell me a little bit more about the people who fill in the NPS survey. Like, are they doctors, nurses, private individuals?
I don't know the titles at this point. I used to run it all the time, but now my QA manager actually runs that, and she changes out the teams. But it would be like people, let's say in our product organization, they're the first people that would consume the application, right? So you're talking about product managers, product owners, and then users of the product, down as far as we can get it, right? To where we can get that feedback. So it can go all the way down that far, depending on how big the application is, determines how big the group is. We've had as many, I don't think we had that many now, but as many as 50, because not everybody's going to respond. So we're trying to really just get it to the people that are going to respond. As many as 50 people, giving feedback on some of these applications. Sometimes it's a smaller group. We really want to try to get it to the people mainly the people that are driving the changes that they're wanting to see in the application, and are we delivering exactly what it is that you need?
Okay.
And
So,
those get filtered up from the field all the way up to the product team. That's how
oh,
we do.
okay.
So
So
yeah,
from the that was my
yeah,
next
yeah, yeah.
question is tell me a little bit more about the application, the problem that it solves. Then I'll get a better idea of like the chain of custody of who's
Well,
responding.
if we were doing one app, like just one app in particular, it's like referral management.
Okay.
So we can have data coming in from different sources, different portals, and basically it goes through referral management process, and then it goes on out to our EMR from there. And so basically, I'm just trying to leave names generic on this and everything like
Okay.
that. So, but
So what is
that's
EMR before?
it's like it's our medical records, storehouse, basically, if you will.
Okay.
So yeah, so we have data coming in through different sources. It comes through our referral management process with attachments and referrals from doctors, et cetera. We process them for referral. It goes out to our EMR, and there's a lot of different people that can touch the application, in between there. But that's just one of the applications. That's the one I'm using here for this case
Okay.
study where
Oh, that's good.
yeah. And it's
Okay.
it sits on top of Salesforce. I can share that information.
Okay, got it.
So
All
yeah.
right, so that's good. All right, you said also one of your bullet points that I wrote down when we first spoke was intriguing too. You said defects can happen, but most often happen in communication about requirements. And you put it in context when you said requirement escape. The Boeing CEO was famous recently
Right.
for saying a defect escape, right? About the door plugs. So tell me more about a requirement escape and where that happens, where the breakdown happens in communication.
Yeah, I think what happens is, well, I think so. We talked about communication was a really big deal, and if you guys, I'm sure a lot of everyone on the call is familiar with this, but you know how teams they're supposed to adopt agile values, and most of the time when you read, even if you go out to like Scrum Alliance and everything like that, you'll see the main Scrum values are like commitment, courage, focus, openness, and respect. I think there's never one on there for communication. So we added that to our values. And when I say communication, I want us to think bigger than what we're talking about, like just talking. I'm talking about communication in how you write your code, and do you comment your code? How clear do you write your defects? How much information do you provide to development so that they can fix it the first time? Do you provide the logs? Do you provide and funnel the defect down to its smallest steps, or do you just throw it over the wall to development? When you communicate acceptance criteria, which was what we're talking about with requirements, acceptance criteria on a user story, it's important to talk about in detail, like what is it that this acceptance criteria does, not what it does, but what does it not include? And oftentimes that's never talked about. But if you're
Hmm.
proactive and you include the things that this requirement is not, then you're helping fence it off, even better for the team. There's a lot of assumptions that can be made. And so we make sure that, we write our acceptance criteria, we meet with product reviews our acceptance criteria, we get sign off on it. We make sure everybody understands it. We make sure everybody's involved with it from the beginning. So when communication like that happens, that's even the communication that you make on Messenger, on Teams, in emails, you have to take the time. I heard a long time ago, someone's taught me this. I don't know who it was, but assume nothing and talk in a third grade fashion whenever you can. And it doesn't mean that people can't understand it, but then there's no chance that everybody won't understand it. So, if you talk like that, assume nothing when you communicate, no matter who you're talking to. That acceptance criteria too might be left for someone else in the future when they come back to it, and the person it was intended for originally is gone. If you write it to their understanding, it's useless going forward if it ever needs to be, used again. So we put a really big premium on communication, and then the normal communication about being honest, being transparent. Obviously, I think these things are huge, but those things will only happen if it's getting modeled by management. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, teams are successful or not because of management. Period. End of story. No one will ever get me
Yeah,
to change my mind on that. So
yeah.
when teams fail, it's because management fails the teams.
No, that's a nice segue to one of the questions that came in, and this one was from Steve in the webinar too, about the how you found that ideal velocity, like you said. And was that to what degree did management help you find that, or was that just simple elimination of those of that noise of bugs being in the way to find that velocity?
Yeah, so like I said, I pulled all these numbers from 3 months worth of data. I needed to have 3 data points, 3 full months of anything before I could make any kind of, you got to have some data points. You couldn't just base it off a month. But I knew how many team members I had. I knew how many hours we worked. I was able to see how many hours our user stories were taking us. And I was able to figure out, based on 3 previous sprints when we had defects, how long was it taking us to fix those defects? So I was able to do that. So then I converted, even though we don't work off of hours. So to be clear, when we do our sprints, we don't work off of hours at all, purely story points. So I wasn't going to bring this to the team and show them all this math and hours. That's not, they don't care about that. So I took this behind the scenes and I was like, okay, so really a story point in my team, I know what a story point is. I know how many story points an hour we complete. I know how many story points a day on average we complete within our sprint. So it was easy when I had all that data to come up with, here is what, after 3 months of data, I can see how much a defect is costing this team. And so what I would show them is, okay, we had 4 defects, and 4 defects are going to roughly equal, let's say, a story point. Well, when we first started, we were having like 20 to 30 defects in a sprint. I'm just giving rough estimates here. These aren't exact, but so you could see, if we wouldn't have had some of those defects, we could have delivered another 3, 5, maybe even an 8-point user story. So it was really just to show people, when we don't take our time, here's the cost of that. And we all play a role in us having that issue. So I didn't ask management for it. I just started, when I got there, they said, put together we need some metrics. They didn't know what metrics they wanted. So all the ones I mentioned to you, I learned a long time ago. Push information to management before they ask for it, because then you control the narrative, right? So, and I do have overseas resources, in fact. But most of my team, in fact, is offshore, that work different hours. So they're based in India. We're about a 30-70 split. I have some people onshore. But most of my team is offshore. Most of the development team is offshore as well. We found that for us, having our BAs, because communication is of the utmost important and they're sitting between the two teams, we needed those people onshore. So I think the BA role is the most important role in every IT organization, and I'm a QA person. So I think the BA role is absolutely the most important one, and the
Yeah.
BA business analyst, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, great. That's good. I'm glad. I see I have the questions on the right pane visible, probably like you do. So
Yeah, I see them popping up.
you're doing my
Absolutely.
job for me, which is great. It really
I
makes it
know.
easier to grease the skin. So if, because it is overseas, how do you mitigate the risk of communication problems that either may be separated by time between here
Mhm.
and there, or communication among themselves and how they come back to you?
Mhm.
Is there any techniques that you use to just mitigate risks that something may get miscommunication?
Okay, so this might sound like a really trite answer to the question you just asked, but here are 2 things that I do. And in fact, I just did it this week. Um, we do not, gosh, this. So, okay, here we go. We treat our offshore team like they're team members. They have no idea that they don't work for Accent Care. So, and what I mean by that is that we ask that, I think this is what encourages, I'll get to the point here. I think this is what actually makes them feel like they're free to communicate. Because if you ever notice, when you work with teams that are remote, they're usually just going to say yes to anything and everything. They don't obviously feel empowered sometimes to disagree, to offer another point of view or whatever, because they feel like they were hired to do a job. They're going to do whatever you tell them to do. And there's not a lot of critical thinking that happens sometimes, because they don't feel empowered to do so. So when I manage this team offshore, we set it up to where we ask them to grade us every quarter. How are we doing? Because at the end of the day, if your vendor isn't successful, it's your fault. It's not their fault. But most companies make vendors the scapegoats when they're unsuccessful. And usually it's just like I said, it's always management's fault when a team fails. I will say also, when a relationship fails with a vendor, it's your fault. It's not the vendor's fault. And so we treat them like that. So we do things like have one-on-ones with, we didn't go to a company and say, bring us resources. We interviewed everybody to make sure they were a culture fit. We explained to them what our culture was and what the expectation was. I have one-on-one meetings with them, like all, regardless of position. Like this was my week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Every morning for 3 hours, I was meeting with different people to make them feel like they're a part of the team. We send them Accent Care swag. I mean, we want them to feel like they're a part of the team. And in doing so, I think that opens up the avenues for communication to even happen, because I think a lot of times with vendors, it's a monologue. It's the company talking to the vendor, and that's all it is. And we get feedback from them now. They come to the retros. They're a part of the team, obviously. They give us feedback. And I just think it's a really, I think that encourages that communication. Obviously, there are challenges because sometimes words don't always mean the same thing in the same place, that type of thing. But I've found, when we write acceptance criteria non-technically and we write it simply, it leaves a lot of the ambiguity, off the table. So we try to write like that, and we're not perfect, clearly. We
Yeah,
have
sure.
tons of room for improvement, but that's what those are some things we try to do. And I just think it always comes to people at the end of the day. If you find a
Yeah.
way to make people feel empowered and important, it solves 95% of your problems.
Yeah.
Technology
Yeah.
is a great thing, but people are what matter.
Tell me more about this, because it's part of your abstract, about values and culture,
Mhm.
and you just said it a few minutes ago, fit. So
Mhm.
what are the values? What kind of culture are you trying to instill? Um, and let's see if we can like
Right.
parse that a bit.
Right. So I'll keep it clean, but we'd have a no a-hole policy. So when you interview someone, I don't care if they're smart or not, or how great they are, how they worked at Microsoft and Google and blah, blah, blah. I mean, you know, if you come off like that, then yeah, you're not a fit. You can teach people technology. You can't teach people not to be jerks. So we have a no jerk policy right out of the gate. I definitely always hire for culture over, technology. We always make sure that the teams know that we are here to make them successful. So we try to set up an absolute servant leadership. And I don't like it when people take servant leadership, and that doesn't mean you're weak. That doesn't mean you don't define the fences. In fact, it means the opposite. It means
Yeah.
you're very straightforward right out of the gate, and you tell them these are the expectations and this is what we expect. And the most important thing is you have our trust until you prove otherwise. You don't have to, I have to earn your trust. You don't have to earn mine. You've got mine.
Right.
I will
Wow.
earn yours. And
That's pretty rare.
I think when
Yeah.
you set it up like that, and then when you take the time and you meet with people, we have one-on-one meetings with everybody on the team, and when we do, sometimes we don't have something to talk about, and that's okay. So I want to know how your family's doing. Hey, your kid was sick last time we talked. How are they feeling? Are
Yeah.
they feeling better? That kind of stuff. So those are the kind of values that we want to have, where it's, we succeed as a team, we fail as a team, we don't fail as subgroups. And that can happen sometimes, right? A team succeeds and they're kicking butt. We're doing great. And then a team fails and it's like, oh, well, QA missed this. So then we start to delineate the sub teams within a team. We're all going to succeed as a team, but when we fail, now we start to try to find the team that had the problem, or maybe even find the tester or the developer, whatever. And that's not the culture we're after. I tell my teams all the time, if you're going to fail, fail gloriously, like fail gloriously. And I say that all the time, like during an interview process, and people don't really think I'm serious. And I'm like, no, really, fail. Agile wants you to fail fast anyway, right? And I'm just saying, well, go ahead and fail gloriously, because when you fail, then everybody will get to learn from it and we'll get better for it, because
Yeah.
nobody got to where they are or learned what they've learned in their life without failing multiple times, dozens of times, hundreds of times. So people need to know when they get in that they're not walking on thin ice, and that they're, like I said, I'll earn your trust. You've got mine. If you do something 3 times in a row that we've talked about, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Obviously, we'll talk about it. But until that time, I mean, I think anything you can do to take the pressure off of people and to let them know you actually care. And I think people know in 5 minutes if you're
Yeah.
sincere or not. They absolutely know. And if you
Yeah.
think they don't know, you're fooling yourself, I think, because
Yep.
people know if you give a rip about them.
Well,
And, if
that's an important component. Yeah.
yeah.
It was,
Yeah, I just think people know. And if you can be transparent as a leader, I have a leader on my team, and he has stood up before, and maybe a decision was made, above his head on something, and he's honest. He's like, I don't necessarily agree with that decision, but we're going to do it. that's empowering, to not hear someone who's just a robot. We're going to do it anyway, but here's what I think on this. But you know what? I'm going to follow the chain of command. And when people are just transparent and real, and they're not just playing a role at work, you're just your authentic self, who you are. I mean,
Yep.
if people really believe in you, I think they're willing to go the extra mile. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? If they feel
I
like it's
totally agree. There's Joshua Kirievsky talks about this. He's the founder of Industrial Logic, a consulting firm. He talks about psychological safety, right, in the workplace. So I wanted to ask you, if I were to start in accent care, and I don't know you and you don't know me, and we kind of assign each other kind of a line of trust credit, right, that we're going to borrow from. What techniques would you use to make me feel psychologically safe in my first 2 days?
Mhm. So we actually have an onboarding plan that we actually did. It's like about 6 months ago, where we actually talked about these very things. So we would know when someone came on. The first thing we would do is leave you alone on day one for the most part, because you have a bunch of HR things that you need to do, and you have to take every
Yeah.
certification, sexual harassment, this and that, and PHI, all that kind of stuff. So not and get you involved in the team. In fact, like for the first week, like get your logins. Do you have access to servers? That stuff
Yeah.
can happen. Meet with certain people on the team. Like, we will put on your schedule that you will meet with certain people throughout the organization, so you get a very good understanding right out of the gate. These are the people you're gonna work with. These
Yeah.
are their titles. A meet and greet type of thing, not a big thing where all 50 people just go, "Hi, welcome to the team," and that's it. It's like you're gonna meet with all these different people, and you're gonna get to know who they are. You can talk about whatever you want to talk about. You can ask them about their role. You can ask them what might make you successful in the role from their point of view. You could talk to them about their favorite football team. Doesn't matter. We don't want
Yeah.
to script it like that. We want to let things happen naturally. But I think that's super important. And then the next thing is, when they get involved in a team, make sure they're set up for success. So what I mean by that is, we hear about allocation all the time. Someone gets on a team, oh, they need to be allocated. That whole allocation thing drives me nuts. I mean, think about it. People are always looking for this mythical 100% allocation. If I get on the freeway to drive home and the freeway is 100% allocated, where am I going? Nowhere.
Right.
What do people that are 100% allocated get done? Almost nothing, because they don't have time they're over allocated. They don't have time to do anything. No one works that way. And so we would make sure that that person is set up at, like, 80% allocation. We would give them something small to start with and let them work their way up. And if they feel they can go faster, okay, then maybe they'll pull something in. They'll come to us and tell them. But setting people up for success, those first 2 days, like you're saying, that first week is it's like a first impression. You're going to set that person's mind about what they think about that organization and you as a leader and their coworkers based on that's the most important, arguably the most important time they're going to have, from my point of view. And if you do it right, and you
Yeah.
just care. And
Yeah.
and then the other thing is that we have someone assigned to that person that is their go-to person. So
Yeah.
whatever question they have, it could be an HR question, it could be anything. Someone internally who knows the ropes and knows who to contact. When you have a problem, you contact this person. Obviously, I'm always a point of contact if you need me, but if not, it's a coworker, so that we can build relationships like this, not just up and down. And
Yeah.
so they'll go to that person, and that person is kind of like their buddy for like the first month, 30 days, to answer any questions. So they feel like they have a place to go, and they won't feel, like they're asking dumb questions. There are no dumb
Yeah. Yeah.
questions.
And this is one of the bullet points that you promised as well, and I think it's a really important one. You said the team has to agree to a set of principles to guide them with things, and talk a bit about a few of those principles that
Right.
come to mind that you need to establish and be aligned on that you think makes for success.
Right. So I think this is super important. When you look at the normal Scrum values, one of the ones that comes to mind is transparency. I mean, I agree with most of the Scrum values that are out there. Transparency, I think, is just absolutely, I guess they maybe call it openness, but um, having that transparency, you have to be able to have difficult conversations. It's easy to manage, it's easy to work when everything's going great. But what happens when something doesn't go great? How do you handle it? That's where you earn your money. And so you have to be able to have that transparency to be able to talk in a non-confrontational manner where people can put their swords down and people aren't defensive. And we have an honest conversation in a retro. What do we need to keep doing? The normal things. What should we stop doing? What should we do more of? that type of thing. And what can we do to get better? And I think this is a real key here is that you have to, when you have those meetings and you come up with that list, how many places have we worked at where you get this list out of a retro, it gets written down, it gets logged, and then that's it. And then you have a retro the next month, and some of those same things show up here, and then it goes on a list. So the main thing to do there is assign it, give someone ownership of that. And then we have our Scrum Master follow up 2 weeks later to make sure how are we tracking on these. And then we lead off our next retro. These were the 5 items we had before we get started on this retro. Can we close each of these 5 items? Did we do these 5 things? So we have an accountability there. So I think that value in and of itself of just being transparent, I think is absolutely huge. I think another small thing, which is going to sound funny, I know, John, is having a sprint goal is Agile 101. There's not that many places I've worked where they send out a sprint goal where they make themselves accountable in front of God and everybody and say, we're delivering X to you on this date, you're getting this. And we do that. We actually send a sprint goal and we tell them. And that way, we're accountable. And, that's another thing that talks about like the Scrum values is commitment. And that's because that's a Scrum value. So I think accountability, I like accountability. Because this is what we said we were going to do. So, we need to do what we say we're going to do. So I
Yeah,
think
yeah. There's that notion of the say-do ratio, and so I want to give you something that I'm sure has happened to you and happened to some of us, where you're and how you would handle it. So you do a sprint, you're on the team, you have story points, you have user stories assigned, you have people assigned, you've accounted for vacations and subject matter expertise. It's going really well. It comes time for the demo, assuming you do a demo, and it didn't go very well because there were unforeseen circumstances beyond your control. And now you got to carry that forward into the next sprint, or
right.
maybe you do a hardening sprint. How have you handled things despite good communication, despite values alignment, despite having clear goals? Something happened beyond your control and you have to adapt. What value then comes in and says, no, no worries, this is what we're going to do?
Right. I think basically just the fact that we're, again, transparency, we're not. So I can tell you, we actually just had a sprint like this. I don't want to make it sound like I'm giving these ideas and all this
Sure.
stuff and that everything is always perfect, because I
Yeah, yeah.
don't want that to be there. But like we just had a sprint where we had 3 user stories in the sprint we're in right now. We had 3 user stories, got into UAT, and bam, we found a bunch of defects in UAT. And the team was really upset about it. And we're like, oh man, we're not going to be able to deliver
I
these.
assume that's user acceptance testing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry for the
Yeah,
acronym.
no
It's
problem.
user acceptance testing.
Just to make
Sorry.
sure.
Yep.
Yep, that's okay.
Keep me honest.
Yeah.
So we found some defects there, and there were more than we could fix in the amount of time we had left in our sprint. So we had to roll those 3 stories. We're not delivering those 3 stories.
Hmm.
So we had to go back and be honest and say, we missed this. So oftentimes we'll go back and say, here's where we made our mistake. I mean, obviously, we want to be honest. So we want to be transparent. If we're going to be transparent when we're doing great, we've got to be transparent when we're not.
Yeah.
Tell them, here's where we missed. Here's what we're going to do to fix that in the future. We tell our product team, because at the end of the day, we're taking orders from them, right? So we tell them that, and then we don't try to make it look pretty, but we just do tell them. And like I told the team, don't worry about it. We found it in a test environment. That's better than finding it in production. So let's take a win out of that. We can, there's no reason to berate anybody. There's no reason to be totally frustrated. Like, how do we avoid this in the future? What were the real causes of the issue? How do we avoid it? And we go back and we tell the customer the truth. And we tell our internal customers, we're not going to be able to deliver those 3. We had some issues. If
Yeah.
we would have delivered it, it would have been a nightmare for you and for us. And so we're going to deliver them though in the next sprint, and we will do our best to deliver that along with what you already had planned if we can.
Yep.
Right. Again, you notice when I gave those metrics, I didn't give anything about velocity, because to me, the velocity is irrelevant. Because so what if I meet some great velocity and I don't deliver it with quality? Well, then did I really deliver velocity? No, you really didn't, because you're just going to end up working it again in the next sprint. So you didn't really deliver, and you certainly didn't deliver with quality. So people get hung up on velocity. So I just take the velocity metric off the table. I can go back and look at previous sprints and see about what we delivered, and I can project it, but we don't really measure velocity for that reason.
Hmm.
People get too hung up on velocity, and
Yeah.
I prefer to be focused on quality.
All right. Well, let me check in with our mission and our theme. Quagileology, the study of the quality mindset in agile teams that help give insights into how teams can form as a team before they begin delivering so that they are set up for success and failure. And you've
Right.
paid off a lot of the promises that you made in your abstract with these bullet points about values and metrics and psychological safety. What important point might not we have hit yet in this notion of quagileology?
I would say teams don't just happen, they're built. So if you look at that, like again, management's problem, if management's building a team, I can take five of the best NBA players together and put them on the Lakers and with LeBron, and they're still not going to win a championship. You look at the Mavericks that had one superstar with Dirk Nowitzki, and they won a championship because they had a bunch of role players because everybody knew what they were supposed to do, and other people could play other positions. And that's kind of what we do in Agile too, right? Sometimes developers test, sometimes you might have a QA person that knows some development. You might have a QA person that knows some BA stuff. You have to build a proper team. And if a team is, a lot of times Agile is thrown over to an IT organization. So we're bringing a new IT, a new Agile. We're going to do Agile. We're going to do Agile. No one knows what that means. Anybody with a big title has no idea what that means. They don't know what that means for future deliveries or anything. If you don't take the time to build a team and talk to the team about here's how we want to do work and here's why, and here's the benefit to it, and here's what you're going to have to gain from it, or here, as an old CEO of mine used to say, what's the so what? Like, why do I want to do this? And you can iterate to them, this is why this is a good thing. This is how it's going to make, here's what you're going to get out of it. Here's what the team is going to get out of it. And here's why we would want to do it. I think that's super, super important. And I think that when you do that, then you're saying that's the psychology of a team, and they have to work together. You can't put a team together. You've got to give them that, you said hardening period. Perfect illustration for me is a team needs a hardening period. It takes you a while. You've heard, everyone's heard the forming and the norming and the storming and the performing and all that. And that's exactly true, though. When you bring it over into Agile, a team has to take a while to learn, oh, John communicates this way. So what's the best way John receives information? I probably need to provide it like this. And you get to know your team first. You're not just going to go out because you got 5 NBA players and start winning championships. It just doesn't happen like that. And I could get 5 superstars and have the best DBA, the best Apex developer, and the best QA team, and the best DevOps guy, and we could deliver a turd. It doesn't matter if people don't understand their roles and they don't have the same values. You know what I mean? That, I think, like we talked about, if some people might be on a team, and if you're playing a sports analogy again, they're playing for money. This guy's playing for a Super Bowl ring. This guy's playing for legacy. This guy's playing to do this or whatever. If they have shared values, those are the teams that have their eye on the prize, that are successful. And so I just think that I think that's really the big example that I have, is that the psychology of a team, that has to be first. They have to understand what is valued, and management has to absolutely mimic the values that they expect from an Agile team. If they don't, a lot of teams take on their personality of the people that are typically above them, right? Kids take on their personalities of their parents. So
It's interesting. Yeah, this is a nice segue to a question, because we're in the advanced levels now of this talk, because you're hitting all of the marks, Blake, and I'm really glad that I'm able to form this kind of next question, and that is, some agilists believe that roles are bad, that anybody
yeah.
should be able to do anybody else's job.
Mhm.
And I'm hearing, what I resonate with is, roles are important. Like, here's my role on the team. This is my space. This is what I do. This is what I'm good at. This is my service to the team. Where do you fall between having someone be able to be replaceable or commoditized, which has advantages,
Mhm.
versus someone who loves what they do and is good at it and is dedicated?
Yeah. That's why it's so funny. I thought you might ask me that question when I alluded to that, because you're exactly right. Some pure agilists believe, oh, there's no such thing as a role. And that's great when you're a startup company, I think, and you don't have any products in production and everybody can, that's an easy thing to say. But as you get big, you acquire companies, you get a bunch of apps, you do have people that are specially in areas, and people become the job description over time. You know what I mean? Like the job description might change, but this person is still working under this job description I was hired at 20 years ago, but you need them to be this now. That's a tough transition. So you have to like actually be mindful about that. And what can I do to get Bob to hear or get Judy to hear? Because the job description we need them to do is morphing and they need to morph
Yeah.
with it. So are you investing in training to get those people what they need to do? Now, I do think for us, everybody has a main role. But I do have scrum masters that are one scrum master is the QA manager. We don't have a specific role of scrum master that just does scrum master things all the time. I have BAs in scrum master roles. I was in a scrum master role, with my whatever title I had at the time. It doesn't matter. But, so we were being flexible there. I do have developers on some of our teams sometimes that help test. So they're jumping out of their primary role, but if someone to me doesn't have a primary role, then I think that can lend itself to chaos too, because then who's doing what? You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, I was over here doing this. Yeah, right. But you're the developer. You didn't do a code review over here. You missed the code review. We needed to have the code review. You're the only person that could do the code review in this instance, let's say. But I think it's good to have all that. I think it's great to have technology where you have automatic deploys and DevOps and everything. I think that's all great, but there's still the human component to this, which makes it all work.
Yeah, I agree. I think so I saved my toughest question for last because I'm really fascinated how you're going to answer this. But now that we've talked about roles, there's that role of developer,
Mhm.
programmer, and the role of tester. And in Agile, they blur the lines. So do you on the composition of your team, is it a mix of both, like a software design engineer that's contributing to user stories, or do you have a hard line between this guy or this person is a tester, or their focus is to find problems, and this person, they're a creator, right? They build, they look at specs, they make sense of requirements, and they go and build.
Yes. Yeah, it's the latter. We do have people whose soul's job it is in my QA team. They are finding defects. That is what they do. They are writing test cases where we need them. We have automation. We have regression suites. We have performance testing automation that we have. We have API automation. We might have through Selenium. That's all great. But we have people whose job it is to actually find defects because they know the system really well. You can't automate everything. Excuse me. And we
Mhm.
do have people that are just developers. I would venture to say, in my experience, developers are developers because they want to create something. They don't want to test something. If they wanted to test something, they would probably be a QA person. And in
Yeah.
fact, a lot of the people that find that they don't like creating oftentimes become QA people. And that's great. But I think that, I would say on our team, we're still pretty traditional in that sense. Um, I don't, the BAs everyone is included though, like when we're doing our backlog grooming and everything, like we're getting input from the team. We're not just sending the BAs off by themselves. I mean, the BAs can leverage anybody they want and bring in. We have an architect, a main architect on our application. So that person's included. They do technical review of all of our stories and everything to make sure that, it aligns with, their vision and what they know of the system because they might know it better. Our BAs are also system admins in our system because they have certifications. So they're technical BAs, so they know both sides of they know the app, but they know the back end as well, and they can create in the back end, configuration wise. And then the other thing is that we've promoted some people within, like my QA manager was a former BA, and she's also the Scrum Master. So we have a person that was on my team that jumped into an RPA role. He was automation on my team. He jumped into an RPA role. So
What's RPA?
mixing people like robotic process automation. So that's where you're
Really?
doing it. He jumped to another team, but he's doing like, that,
Robotic process automation?
yeah, RPA automation. So it's
Huh.
like automation where a lot of tasks that would be considered like repetitive, you go in and you
Okay.
can automate a lot of business processes that are just
Oh, I
manual
see. So
tasks that
business
happen.
business rules and
Yes, yeah, that happen
now I get
over and over. So they automate that stuff so that you might, so at the end of the day, you're probably reducing headcount because you're doing stuff that doesn't need to be done manually anymore, but
understood. Yeah, yeah. Oh, that
cost
makes
savings
I've never
initially.
heard the term before,
Yeah.
but
RPA.
there's, yeah, I understand the spirit of it, right? And there's that on any team, there's overhead, there's administrivia, there's forms to fill out and status reports to do, and developers don't tend to want to do that.
They
And
really
so I
don't.
love that role of somebody going, I'm our admin, I'm like our company clerk, and I
Mhm.
will take from you any admin stuff that's in your way to free you up to do more development or more testing or more
Right,
designing or
right.
more business analysis. Um, so it sounds like, yeah, there's so much to unpack from this talk, Blake, but I think you've delivered on all of the, even the difficult notions that we tend to talk about in software development that are controversial. And you come across to me as learned and experienced, but also humble and able to guide someone through these interesting waters of methodological challenges. And you make it sound really easy. And I think is at the heart of it, it kind of is, if you come back to us as people who have questions and have, moods and ideas, and
Mhm.
how do we work together as a team, which is really to your point of agile team formation.
Right.
I'm left feeling like, wow, that you hit all the right marks. And I think it's a good time to throw it to our audience. Some of you have been throwing some questions in, but let me just turn it over to anybody else who has had time to ruminate, perhaps on what question you can ask Blake, because I'm pretty confident he can handle pretty much anything
Oh, I don't
you can
know.
throw at him.
Mhm.
So, uh, and if you don't have questions, that's fine too. But feel free to, don't be shy and light something up here in the chat. Um, so let's see. So while I give people think time there, um,
Yeah.
so where are you at right now in terms of your project, or even multiple projects that you're on, uh, in terms of like a challenge that you, maybe someone in the audience may be able to help you with? Is there anything that you're struggling with or may need, some opinion on?
Oh, that's a really good question. Something I've struggled with that we're still getting through. It's easy to get, we've been trying to surface our metrics up. Like there's lots of different teams and lots of different metrics, and they don't all work exactly the same, right? Agile's a framework. Not everybody paints the picture exactly the same, but we've been trying to get some uniformity across our 4 teams. It's not always easy. Different technologies, different customers, different deliverables, just different. It's just different. It'd be great if you could copy and paste and say, do exactly this, but every team is unique, right? So that's why I like Agile, because, like on one project we flipped over to Kanban for them for the final stages of their deliverable instead of doing Scrum. And that actually worked tremendously. So something I'm trying to roll out, if anyone's ever done it, is I'm also trying to roll out Agile outside of IT. So I actually have a meeting tomorrow where I'm meeting with accounting, and I'm trying to get them to buy into the idea of Kanban. And then I've met with like supply chain group, and I'm doing the same with them, or at least talk to them initially, and might have an opportunity in the future. So, that's something I've never done before, but it's something
Yeah,
I'm excited to try to do. Um, so if anyone's ever done that before, I'm all ears
I highly recommend it.
doing
I
it.
use a product called Trello, which is super easy to
Oh
use.
yes, I
Just
like Trello.
Yeah, yeah. Simple cards across columns. You make up your columns, you make up your cards, boom, and you talk about the state of an objective.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, feel free to reach out, and if I don't have experience
Yes.
with more of
Okay.
the like whip limits, I don't get into that in terms of Kanban, but I think it's just a simple idea
Yeah.
that can go a long way.
I do
Um,
see that question about interviewing the vendors, like
oh yeah, you see
how
that?
did they take it?
Go ahead, take that one.
I didn't really ask. I just said we want to interview the people. I mean, if we're going to be working with those people, I mean, why would I not want to interview them? Because I've been on both sides of that coin early on in my career. I had someone bring me people and it didn't work well. And I told myself after that, it's never happening again. I'm interviewing the people, or someone on my team is interviewing the people that understands what we're looking for. And so we initially, when we worked with that vendor, they just weren't getting what we were looking for. But once they found the first 1 or 2 people after that, Now they're providing the value that we needed. They're going and finding the people. And now they're not even sending us people. Like they filled a role for us that took a couple months to fill because they kept finding people and then they were disqualifying them. They're like, nope, that's not what
Yep.
they're looking for.
Right.
That's not what Accent Care wants because they understand our culture. So I don't think I don't know how uncommon that is, to be honest with you. Maybe other people have done it before, but when you have your skin on the line,
Yeah.
you need to make sure you've got people that are aligned with you. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you don't have any chance to be successful.
So,
So
so Jared has a good follow-up. The assumption being that was a long-term and strategic project then for him?
it was a strategic and long-term relationship. I didn't pick the vendor. I was told which vendor we needed to use. And it was just like, this is going to be our vendor going forward. So I need you to just take care of it. And I was like, okay, well, then we're not going to treat this vendor like a vendor. This vendor is
Yeah.
going to be like,
Yeah.
Okay.
so that's how that works. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Andrew had a question. You mentioned creators, like software developers, may not like to test. So within QA roles, have you seen places where creativity is important and or what ways to promote it within that role type?
Yeah. So I have usually with my team, especially, I know we're running short on time, but usually they want to learn something, some kind of technology or something. So with each person on the team, got a 1 year plan, a 3 year plan. What is it you want to do? Where do you want to go? How can I help get you there? What are the trainings? I'll go find the trainings for them if they don't know. I'll give them a list of things that they can go get trained for. We make it a part of the yearly goals so they have a chance to be creative and learn something they don't want. I've got people that are like learning Python. I've got people that are like learning AI. And AI might not have anything to do with their job right now, but they're interested in it. And it probably will have something to do with their job soon enough. So when they want to be creative like that, if they can't, I encourage them to find a tool in QA if they like it. You know what I mean? If there's a tool that you think is good, we'll run it through the security team. If they're cool with it, we'll use it
Yeah.
if you think it's going to help you. So basically just giving them input, but I think having a plan for each person on your team so they know that you have a plan for them and you're
Yeah.
invested in them for 1 and 3 years, and then you show up and you actually get them those trainings. I think that helps them stay creative and they can stay focused on
Yeah.
the QA stuff, but they have an outlet for it at
You
least.
have an outlet for it. Okay. I'm going to give you a challenge in 60 seconds for Park's question. One technique to ensure success with an offshore relationship.
Put your people first before your projects, even the offshore team, or you won't have any people left to work on your projects. So
Okay.
put them first. Put them first. Don't make them feel like they're offshore. Don't make them feel like they're anything. Make them feel like they're on your team. Make them feel like they're an employee.
Yeah.
Get to know them. You know what I mean? And you'd be amazed, especially with offshore. And I'm talking my team is in India. You would be amazed at how much when you do that, how thankful, beyond thankful. They think it's the biggest deal that you're doing. And you're really just treating them like a human being,
And like
really,
people. Yeah.
and they just think that's the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome. Well
Yeah,
done.
I agree
Good challenge.
100%. Whether it's offshore or if it's offsite or if it's just, out of state, it relates to all of those things. I don't mean to interrupt. I do. If it may interrupt, John, if that's okay, because my battery is almost fading. So I'm
Oh,
sorry.
okay. Got it.
But I want to complicate or compliment our speaker on one thing that you said, and I really liked it, and it related so much to what we try to strive for at Gordo, and that's the no jerk policy. And John, you put this so eloquently in the past, and maybe you can elaborate on it. But there's a different mindset between bug reporting, which can feel like grading or criticism. And what you said one time was, we're communicating our observations. And I loved that because the bugs are already there. All we're doing is didn't do what the red button was supposed to do, or whatever it might be. But it's a different way of phrasing your report back to the developer, and you don't want them to feel insulted, because what you really want to do is develop a relationship between the tester and the developer.
Yeah.
And so I like that. I like that
It's a good point.
a lot.
Yeah, it's just sometimes I call them these are our findings. This is what we found. Like literally. You
Yeah.
can, if bugs or defects or people are allergic to that, especially the C level, just say, here are our findings. and you give them the option to say, well, we'll defer that for now. But I think there's a lot of that, Blake, that you brought to this, that you've made the nuance into something concrete. And thanks again for spending time with us and hitting all your promises and your marks. I think you brought the goods, and this is a great session. So thank you.
I appreciate
Yes,
you.
thank you very much. Thanks, Blake.
Thank you so much for the
You
chance.
had so many great points. I could go on and on for 10 or 15 minutes of all the notes I made, but I thank you for that. And
Absolutely.
I think he's fading out.
Oh yeah,
Everybody.
Network.
By the way, and thank you for joining.
Okay. Thank you so much, guys. I
Yeah.
really appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Blake. Thanks, John.
Pleasure.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Great. Have a great night.
Thank you. Have a
Thanks
great
so
night.
much.
I'll see you.
Bye-bye.